And our next guest is going to be in the room when this unveiling happens. Former governor, former U.S. Ag Secretary who served Bush 43, our friend edschafer. So are you going to bring along a knife to cut the tension, or do you think George Bush will be his usual classy self and sort of give Obama a pass on all the rhetoric of the campaign trail, Ed?
Well, good morning, Scott. It's great to be with you on the air again. And hello to your listeners. I'm from Washington, D.C. It's kind of fun, to be out here for this event. And I think it's one of those deals where, it's a respect for the office, the presidency. It's going to be a nice celebration. They're going to unveil the portraits of both the President Bush and First Lady Laura. And, I don't expect there to be any politics and things, although it is rather unusual that this kind of event takes place during political season. Usually they happen, well before, you get into a re-election campaign. So, there may be some stares back and forth and maybe a bad look or two from a cabinet official or whatever, but I suspect that all three presidents that are going to be in the room, are going to be jovial and happy and, looking forward to the office of the presidency's history there as much as anything.
Who decides on the timing, by the way?
I don't know. I suppose in some cases the artist does. They have to get the portrait done. So the important part of that is getting the painting in place and framed and accepted and all those kinds of things. But I would suspect that the timing has to do with everybody's schedules and trying to get very busy people scheduled for an event at the same time and all. That's got to be pretty tough. So I would guess it's a combination of factors, not the least of which is when the portrait gets done.
Now, you were just honored with your portrait unveiling at the U.S. Department of Agriculture not long ago, and I know you and Nancy were back for that neat event. How does this portrait deal work? Do you have to actually sit for it for some time, or do they do the portrait from a picture, or how does it work?
Well, I think every artist works differently, and a lot of the artists today for portraits tend to do photo likenesses. They try to make these portraits that are just kind of exactly like you took a photo, and it's not really what the artist of portraiture used to be. And I think the days of sitting with a person had the palette of paint and then on the canvas over and over and over again is virtually gone. When we did mine, my artist was not particularly a portrait artist, so he didn't do portraits, but we wanted him to do it. I spent a day with him. He did some pencil sketches, took a lot of photos, and then he worked off of that. So I just had to spend the one day sitting there.
Must have been like a caged animal sitting there still for one day, smiling and.
That's not my style, Scott.
Yeah.
But it was interesting, and to see how the whole process works, goes from an artist seeing it to a sketch to an actual painting is a pretty amazing process.
How many of your fellow cabinet members and Bush team members are coming back today? What kind of crowd will be at the White House supporting the Bushes?
Well, we don't know. We were fortunate to be enough on the guest list to be included on the guest list, and we're not really sure who's all going to be there. We're kind of excited about it, though. We know that when we've been to other events with the president, most cabinet members and senior staff members in the White House and things like that in the Bush administration tend to show up. It's a close group, and we went through a lot of war together, and glad to catch up with them again.
If you could pull President Obama aside for a moment today, given, like I say, going back to his inaugural and since, given his sort of, even the campaign against John McCain was really more about George Bush than it was even about John McCain. I mean, this president is, kind of a bare knuckler campaigner. What would you say to him about all of his cheap shots about your former boss?
Well, I think the important part in this issue, if I had an opportunity to mention it, I would say there's a difference between the politics of politics, which is getting elected, and the politics of performance, which is doing the job. And I don't think that President Obama has ever converted from the politics of politics to the actual operations of government. And so he's focused on another person, another name, whose fault it is, what his ideas are, but he's never gotten into that mode of I have to operate, and here's what needs to be done to move this country forward. And I would urge them to kind of click out of campaign mode and get into operation mode, because that's what's, if the case may be, that's going to keep him in office, is how he operates the government. That's what people are going to look for.
Gabe in the South Fargo has a comment about the president. Which one, Gabe? 43 or 44?
Oh, about the current commander in chief. Scott, I really appreciated when you were talking to that last gentleman at the bottom of the last hour. When about just how we talk about people. The president's policies are absolutely disgusting. The things that he's doing are absolutely disgusting. But when it comes down to when we talk about the man, we're talking about a human being created in the image of God. And when I'm an Anglican, and one of the deals in our liturgy is that we pray for men at all times and in all places, everywhere, asking God Almighty to bless them, to keep them, also to bring conversion to them. And so that, that's part of the liturgical process. And it's not just the liturgical process, it's living out a way of life that, why not, one of the big changes that I think could happen is that, if every Christian, every professing Christian within this country were to get on his knees and to say, hey, Lord, we ask that you would pray to heal and change the heart of President Barack Obama. Do you realize what kind of change could be offered through that kind of concert of prayer?
Interesting approach. Ed, any comment on that?
Well, I think Gabe's right. I mean, we tend to get all involved in the name calling and the difficulty and the disagreement of policies, and you move away from respecting the office. And our leaders need prayer. When I was in office, in the governor's office, I knew there were people out there praying for me, and that was very comforting. But it also kind of keeps you centered in what's really responsible out there, and that's for the people. You're responsible to the people and delivering good government. And whether we agree or disagree, that's the political structure. The reality is someone has been elected to office by a majority of people, and they deserve the respect and support of that office.
Hold tight. Up against the break. We'll finish after the break. Don't go away. Okay, back on the Common Sense Club and the Scott Innes Show, chatting with former Governor edschafer, George W. Bush's Ag Secretary, who, along with his lovely wife, Nancy, former First Lady of the great state of North Dakota, are going to head on over to the White House in about an hour and take in the unveiling of the official portraits of George and Laura Bush, which should be a whole lot of fun. Now, is there lunch? Is there a ceremony? What exactly is what's on the docket today over at the White House, Ed?
Well, I think there's a private lunch for the presidents and their families. I believe they'll get together in the upstairs area, get personal quarters, and have lunch about 1 o'clock. Everybody starts moving into the East Room where the official ceremony takes place. Be some social time, this and that. They think it's billed at 1:25 when they actually start the program here Eastern time, and then we're supposed to be out of there by about 3:30, so they'll give us some time to mill around afterwards and visit with our friends and colleagues, and then we'll go off to other things.
Anybody can actually hang the portraits where they're going to be forever? Or?
Well, I suspect they'll do the same thing they did with ours, is they have it on an easel. Both portraits will be on easels, the first ladies and the presidents, and they will take the veiling off and show them off and all that kind of stuff, and then they'll be hung on the walls later. When we had our ceremony on Friday afternoon, they actually hung it Friday night, and Nancy and I had a chance to go over and check it out the next morning, seeing it actually hanging on the wall, which is all quite more impressive than just having it on an easel. And at the White House, it's the same thing as it is at USDA. Is the latest portrait gets put on a certain spot, and then everybody else moves down one slot. So you kind of keep rotating, and the most recent office holder is the one that's in the quote favored spot.
Very good. So there's no politics in deciding where the portraits go. There's a protocol there.
Exactly.
I love it. Very good way to go. Mark in Grand Forks. edschafer, you're on the Common Sense Club at 855-200-1776. Go ahead, Mark.
Yeah, good morning. I think there's confusion about distinguishing between respecting the office of the president and holding the president accountable for what may be high crimes and misdemeanors that approach treason in terms of respecting the Constitution of this United States of America, the greatest country that the earth has ever seen, because Obama, in terms of Fast and Furious, and his Justice Department allowed almost 3,000 weapons to walk into the hands of drug cartels, and one of those guns was traced back to a murder of one of our U.S. Border Patrol as well as high-level Mexican officials. And he's totally disregarding the constitutional checks and balances by using the executive branch, the EPA, to get through legislation like cap and trade that he couldn't do through the legislative process, totally undermining the representative government that is established by the Constitution. So,
okay, I get all that, Mark.
We need to hold them accountable for their crimes against this country.
Get all that, no question about it. That's what a campaign's for, though, isn't it? I mean, in other words, you don't do that at a portrait unveiling today, do you? George Bush shouldn't get up and say, by the way, thanks for the portrait, and you're ruining America.
But see, the Constitution does not prescribe voting as a means to checking government power. It's three separate equal branches of government, including the judicial, which is responsible for prosecuting criminals like Mr. Obama. And there's more evidence of this at my website, standupforyourrights.me.
All right, Mark. Folks can check that out. Knowing George Bush as you do, I mean, he won't even make a joke about politics today. Will he, Ed?
No, he is very respectful for the office. I mean, this guy never walked into the Oval Office without a tie and a coat on. He understands the image of the presidency, and this is not an occasion for politics or for personal problems or whatever. And we've all heard that the reality is you have the politics of things, you have the campaigns, the rhetoric out there, and you have the office, and those things are different. And people like George W. Bush are able to separate them so that they don't take the snide remarks and the comments and the bad campaigning personally. We've all had lots of nasty things said about us, but that's the game. I mean, that's not the politics of things. Separate that from the office. And I agree with Mark. There are constitutional issues here that need to be addressed. They should be addressed, and there are avenues to get them addressed, not the least of which is the ballot box, as you mentioned, Scott. But this is not the time. This is an occasion of honor, of respect, of the office, and of the presentation of the history of the presidency of the United States. And I think that's where we'll keep the focus today.
By the way, the president, in his book, and in an interview I did with him one time, talked about how he remembered very well Jimmy Carter taking pot shots at him, President Bush 43, while he was president. And so he really thinks that's unpresidential and beneath the office. So he just doesn't go there. He just thinks it's the courtesy that ought to be there between presidents. So it's just another reason. It's just his philosophy. I guarantee it's going to be very, very warm, and make it very easy for Obama today to, have spewed everything he's going to spew and be able to show that he's above that. Let's get one more call in here before we let Ed go. Jason in Fargo. Hello, Jason. What's on your mind?
Hey, good morning, Scott. Hi, Governor, and very nice to talk to you. Say, I'm just kind of following up on what Mark had said. At what point is it okay to call names? For example, let's just go with worst-case scenario, Hitler. At what point is it okay to call that guy names? Massacre, murderer, madman, blah, blah, blah. What line is crossed? You know what I mean? So, yes, respecting the office, absolutely, doesn't imply respecting the man. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks. I appreciate that comment. The difficult thing for me is when is it personal and when is it policy or performance? And I think too often we get into calling people names and trying to cut their legs out from underneath them and saying they're bad guys or dishonest or improper from a personal basis, instead of saying, no, here's a policy that they have that I don't agree with. Here's a performance that they're doing that they haven't done the job. Those kinds of things there's plenty of negativity on all sides to point out there. I don't see why they have to get personal and name calling and drag family members in and try to image somebody as being bad and difficult, things like that. Usually public servants are there because they want to serve, they want to accomplish something as far as advancing society or our government, and there just, in my opinion, isn't room for the personal attacks The example you give of Hitler is a good one, and you can certainly point out the fact that when you get into a situation like that where you do have mass murder or you do have someone like Hugo Chavez now, who we all are praying for because of his difficult physical condition now with his cancer and everything, but he was a despotic ruler in Venezuela and trashed the country. Well, where do you start saying? Do you start killing their own people? Then you can call them a murderer or not? I don't know where it comes. It's probably like pornography. You know it when you see it.
Appreciate the call, Jason. Thanks a bunch, Ed. I know you and Nancy will represent the great state of North Dakota well, and hope you greet George and Laura for the Common Sense Club faithful today. Enjoy your time at the White House on a historic occasion.
Yeah, we will. It's an honor to be there, and it's great to be on your show, Scott. Thanks.
Thanks a bunch, Ed. Good chatting with you. Edschafer from Washington, D.C., moments away from heading to 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue for a neat event today. Media is having fun with the event, stirring up odd politics, but we know it'll be a classy event. More coming up, friends.